Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're looking at a set of numbers that are, well, they're frankly hard to believe.
They really are.
Usually when we talk about a crisis in the public sector, there's a bit of sort of eye rolling.
No, everyone wants more money.
Exactly. But the documents we're unpacking today, specifically about Ontario's universities here in early 2026, they're painting a picture that goes way beyond the usual, we'd like a budget increase, We're looking at a projected financial black hole of over $5 billion.
It is a staggering number. And you're right to be skeptical of that word, crisis. But in this case, the math is just incredibly stark.
So it's not just rhetoric.
No, we aren't looking at a wish list for like fancy new gyms or anything like that. We're looking at a report that essentially says the entire business model for universities in the province is collapsing in real time.
Okay, collapsing is a very heavy word. I mean, I drive past the local university. The buildings are still standing. The lights are on. Students are walking around. It doesn't look like a disaster zone. So is this just, administrative panic, or is the foundation actually cracking?
The buildings are standing, yes.
Right.
But the ledger underneath them is bleeding red ink. What we have here is a convergence of factors, a perfect storm, if you will.
Okay.
I've been building for years, and it's finally making landfall right now in 2026.
And the immediate number?
The immediate funding gap is projected to hit $1.3 billion very, very soon. But the terrifying part is the trajectory.
The trend line.
Exactly. If nothing changes, if we continue on exactly this path, that deficit balloons to over $5 billion by the end of the decade.
$5 billion? I mean, that's the GDP of a small country. How does that even happen? How do these huge historic institutions suddenly find themselves staring at a cliff edge?
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't sudden. They've seen it coming. It's just that now 3 specific revenue triggers have been pulled all at once. It's a triple threat.
Okay, let's break this triple threat down, because if I'm a taxpayer, I'm thinking, I pay taxes, students pay tuition. Where is the money going?
That's the right question. So let's look at the first factor, tuition.
Okay.
For domestic students here in Ontario, tuition has been frozen for, 6 or 7 years now?
Which, playing devil's advocate for the students for a second, that sounds like a good thing. Everything else is so expensive.
Absolutely. For a student's bank account, it's a huge relief. But put on your business hat. Imagine you run a bakery. The government tells you you cannot raise the price of a loaf of bread. It has to stay at 2019 prices. But the cost of flour has gone up. Electricity for the ovens, up. Your staff need raises.
Right. Eventually, I'm losing money on every loaf of bread I sell.
Exactly. And that is what's happened. Inflation has driven up all their operating costs, salaries, utilities, maintenance. But their main revenue stream from domestic students is legally capped.
So that's factor one. Costs up, revenue flat. But usually, that's where public funding steps in, right, to fill that gap.
And that brings us to factor two. There was temporary government funding, a sort of stabilization fund, especially after the pandemic.
A patch.
A patch, yes. But the warning bells are ringing now because that temporary funding is ending. The safety net is being pulled away right when the costs are highest.
So the Band-Aid is coming off. But wait, I feel like we're missing the elephant in the room. International students, wasn't that the golden goose?
It absolutely was. And golden goose is the perfect term. For a decade, the strategy to offset that frozen domestic tuition was to aggressively recruit international students.
Who pay 3-4 times as much.
Exactly.
Yep.
Their fees were effectively subsidizing the education of domestic students. It plugged the hole.
Which seems like a smart, if maybe a bit risky, business move.
Until the federal cap hit. And that's the third factor. The limits on international student permits they've shrunk that revenue stream drastically. So the cross-subsidy is gone.
So you've got temporary government money vanishing, domestic tuition frozen, and the high-margin international revenue capped.
It's a pincer movement.
Yeah.
They're being squeezed from every single angle.
It really does sound like a math problem with no solution. But here's where I have to push back a little.
Okay.
Because the common perception, what you hear at dinner parties, is that universities are these bloated, inefficient places. Dean of this, vice provost of that. Surely they can just tighten their belts.
That is a very popular sentiment. And to be fair, in any organization that big, there are inefficiencies, of course.
Right.
But we need to look at what has already happened. This report highlights that universities haven't just been waiting for a bailout. They've engaged in what they call deep cuts and delays.
Define deep. Are we talking about cheaper coffee or real money?
We are talking about over $1 billion in cost-cutting measures that have already been
At
executed.
a billion already.
Yes. That's not future tense. That's done. That's
Okay.
money they've already saved.
So what does $1 billion in cuts even look like? Because again, the lights are still on.
It looks like deferred maintenance. It's like a factory deciding to stop servicing its machines to save cash this quarter.
Okay.
It works for a bit. The machine keeps running. But eventually, the belt snaps, the gears grind, and the whole line stops. That's where we are. They've delayed roof repairs, put off upgrading old systems, left faculty positions vacant when someone retires.
So your class sizes get bigger, and that bucket catching the leak in the lecture hall just sort of stays there.
Precisely. And the argument in this report is that those savings, the fat, if you will, is gone. They're now cutting into the bone.
Right.
We're moving past, let's not cater the staff meeting to, we literally can't afford to run this lab.
That distinction between fat and bone is crucial because if they're at the bone, the next cuts actually hurt the student.
That is exactly where this lands, yes.
So let's walk through that. I'm a parent or I'm a student applying for September 2026. If this $5 billion hole isn't filled, how does my life change?
Well, first you have to get into the class. The first consequence they identify is simply access. Fewer seats in popular programs.
But wait, popular programs are. Well, they're profitable, aren't they? Wouldn't you want to pack them in?
Not if every single student, even in a popular program, costs more to educate than the revenue they bring in. If you can't afford the professors, the TAs, the equipment, you have to cap enrollment.
So the grades you need to get in just go up and up.
They'll skyrocket. The anxiety of getting into university, which is already incredibly high, is going to ratchet up even more because there physically won't be as many spots.
Wow. Okay, so it becomes an even more exclusive club. But let's say I'm lucky. I get in, I'm studying nursing or engineering. What's different for me?
This is where that cutting to the bone really shows up. The report warns of a reduction in student support services.
Which sounds like jargon. What does that mean?
It means mental health support. It means career counseling, academic advisors.
Which honestly, 20 years ago, people might have called extras. But today, with the mental health crisis we see among young people,
It's critical infrastructure. It's not an extra. Imagine you're a student, first in your family to go to university. You're overwhelmed. You're struggling. Right now, you might wait 3 weeks to see a counselor. If you cut that budget, maybe that wait becomes 8 weeks. Or maybe the career center that helps you get a summer job is just a web page now, not a person.
so the safety net for the students dissolves. You get them in the door, you take their money, but then you strip away the scaffolding they need to actually succeed.
That's the risk. The quality of the education itself is threatened. You're in a lecture hall with 400 people instead of 50. You're getting the degree, technically, but are you getting the education?
That is a scary thought, but I want to zoom out because there will be listeners thinking, well, my kids are grown, I have my degree. This sounds like a problem for 19-year-olds. Why should the average person care if universities are broke?
This is where we have to look at what's called the workforce pipeline. It's an economic term, but it affects every single person.
Oh.
Who are these universities training? It's future doctors, nurses, engineers who design our roads and bridges, the teachers in your kids' schools.
These are jobs we desperately need.
And they are incredibly resource-intensive to train. You can't train a nurse with a PowerPoint. You need labs, clinical placements, expensive simulation equipment.
So when cuts happen,
High-cost programs like medicine and engineering are where the squeeze is tightest. If we produce fewer doctors because universities literally cannot afford to train them, that wait time at your local ER gets longer in 5 years.
so the bottleneck at the university becomes a bottleneck for the entire province.
Precisely. You can't just generate a skilled workforce out of thin air. It requires a functioning, well-funded pipeline. If you starve the pipeline, the water stops flowing at the other end.
And I'm guessing this touches the economy too, the whole innovation buzzword.
It does. I mean, think about where new industries come from. Research and innovation at universities are the engines of economic growth.
Yeah.
We're talking about biotech startups, new clean energy technologies, AI advancements. These things start in university labs.
Can you give me a real-world example?
Sure. Things like medical isotopes or AI tools that diagnose diseases faster. They start as research projects. If a university slashes its research budget, those labs close. The top professors, they leave.
The brain drain.
That's it, exactly. They go to the US or Europe where the funding is stable. And the startups that would have spun out of that research, the new jobs, they just never happen. or they happen somewhere else.
So it's an economic stagnation issue. It's not just about academic papers. It's about future jobs and our future tax base.
The report is very clear on that. It says this research is what fuels Ontario's economy.
Okay, so we've established the hole is deep, the causes are structural, and the impact is widespread. This warning is obviously timed for the 2026 provincial budget. What are they actually asking for?
They're being very specific.
Yeah.
They're not asking for a one-time bailout.
No blank check.
No, they're asking for a structural fix. They want the funding model to change.
So what does that look like?
It looks like urgent action and long-term investment that grows year after year. They want a recognition that if costs go up with inflation, funding needs to track with that.
Common sense, really.
You'd think so. They're explicitly rejecting short-term fixes. They're saying, don't just patch the roof again, fix the foundation.
Because if you just patch the roof, we're back here in a year having this exact same conversation.
Exactly. And the stakes, as they frame them, are if universities fall behind, students pay the price, and so does Ontario's future.
It's a heavy pitch, and it forces a really tough conversation about priorities, right? The government has a limited pie. A few billion to universities means that's not going to roads or healthcare or tax cuts.
That is the eternal struggle of any budget.
Yeah.
But it brings up a concept I think is really interesting here. It's called intergenerational equity.
Okay, I like that term. Break it down.
It basically asks the question, does the current generation owe it to the next to provide the same opportunities they had? Most of the people making these budget decisions went to university when tuition was a fraction of what it is now and when per-student funding from the government was much, much higher.
Right. I paid way less for my degree than a kid starting today, even when you account for inflation.
So are we comfortable saying, well, we got ours, but sorry, the money ran out for your generation? If we allow these institutions to degrade, we're essentially borrowing from the future to save money today. We're eating the seed corn.
That's a really powerful way to think about it. It's not just dollars and cents. It's a contract between generations.
And that leads to the final thought I think you should be left with. We often look at these headlines and we ask, what is the cost to fix this? How much will it cost me, the taxpayer?
It's the first question I'd ask. It's a fair question.
It is a fair question. But based on everything we've looked at today, the exhausted savings, the crumbling infrastructure, the threat to the workforce, the real question for the government in this 2026 budget is, what is the cost of not investing?
The cost of inaction.
Exactly. If we let that $5 billion deficit happen, what's the real price tag of a generation with fewer doctors and nurses? What's the economic cost of businesses that never started here? The social costs of students who drop out because they couldn't get support?
You're saying the price of fixing it might be high, but the price of letting it break is way, way higher.
That's the argument they're making. And it's one that's going to be tested very, very soon when that budget drops.
Well, that is a sobering place to leave it. It's about so much more than just exams and textbooks. We will be watching very closely. Thank you for walking us through the math behind the panic.
My pleasure. It's an important story to tell.
And thanks to you for listening to The Deep Dive. If you're a student, a parent, or just a concerned citizen, this is definitely one to watch. We'll see you next time.